Alrighty class, today we're learning about meditation and yoga.
Oh, didn't see you there. Are you guys ready to learn about yoga and meditation? Me too. To start, let's jump into where yoga and meditation all began. Did you know that yoga was first created over 5,000 years ago in northern India? At first, yoga was traditionally viewed as an Eastern practice. However, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, yoga masters began to travel west, attracting attention and followers. This began at the 1893 Parliament of Religions in Chicago, when Swami Vivekananda wowed the attendees with his lectures on yoga and the universality of the world's religions. In the 1920s and 30s, Hatha Yoga was strongly promoted in India with the work of T. Krishnamacharya. Swami Sivananda and other yogis practicing Hatha Yoga continued on until present day. The presence of yoga is available in folk traditions in the Indus Valley civilizations such as Vedic and Upanishadic heritage, Buddhist and Jain traditions, darshanas, epics of Mahabharata and Ramayana, theistic traditions of Shivas, Vaishnavas, and Tantric traditions. In addition, there was a primordial or pure yoga which has been manifested into mystical traditions of South Asia. This was the time when yoga was being practiced under the direct guidance of Guru, and its spiritual value was given special importance. Now we're going to talk about meditation. The practice of meditation as a formal component of the spiritual path is probably most closely associated with Buddhism. The Buddha, who has lived and taught in Southeast Asia about 2,600 years ago, founded an experimental path that inspired generations of practitioners to sit in mindful awareness and breathe their way to lasting peace. According to his teachings, meditative concentration is one of the 3 trainings that, when practiced together, result in awakening or enlightenment. Men and women who gained insight and wisdom by putting the Buddhist teachings into practice taught others, and seekers would travel to learn from great teachers who often lived in cultures far removed from their own, then bringing the teachings back home. At one point, people were practicing some form of Buddhist meditation from their territories of modern-day Afghanistan to Mongolia, and from Japan to Indonesia. Buddhism is known to be a spiritual practice that has adapted to the cultures of the regions where meditation has also taken root. In modern day, meditation and yoga is oftentimes used as a way to relieve stress or to ground ourselves from the chaos of life.
Namaste. Ready to learn how yoga can start a new chapter in your life? While yoga is certainly the poster child of meditative practices, there are several merits to non-traditional forms of meditation. But consider first the ways in which we can connect yoga to literature. Of course, I mean books that teach us yoga, but also ways in which yoga can teach us books. Literary yoga, for example, is an educational practice created by building book love. And it utilizes the physicality of yoga to convey to students the importance of literature. Students will make different yoga poses every time conflict appears in a novel, or perhaps a different pose whenever they encounter a love triangle in their readings. If we go further back and look at the history of yoga and meditation, you can see that it has literary connections from its very beginning. As meditation is a largely Buddhist practice, it of course draws from the teachings of the Buddhist sacred text, the Tripitaka. The Tripitaka encourages concentrative meditation, which is the yoga that we're all familiar with. It's all about focusing on one aspect, such as our breathing or the self. But Buddhist texts also teach insight meditation. This is a training of mindfulness and encourages that one gets in tune with their raw emotions, untainted by critical thinking. Now, let's for a second look at meditation in a non-traditional sense. If we define meditation as any practice which provokes mindfulness, contemplation, and attunement with the senses, it's perfectly reasonable to consider certain works of literature as forms of meditation. In fact, deeply thought-provoking texts are called meditations. Works like these include T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets and Thomas Traherne's Centuries of Meditations.
Yoga really is an art. Let's take a look, shall we?
There are hundreds upon thousands of pieces of art that have yoga and meditation as their central focus. It shows the evolution of these practices and also how essential they are to the culture.
The first basic poses of yoga are actually recorded in works of art. Art depicting yoga and meditation is usually centered around a single enlightened being. These enlightened beings are usually always found sitting in a lotus pose. They are representing what you should be striving towards when you practice meditation and yoga. As shocking as it may sound, throughout history, yogis have not always been the most peaceful people. Many paintings also depict wars and violent scenes. These works of art shed a different light on the westernized yoga and meditation that we know today.
Meditation requires the same amount of focus that is used when you're looking at any type of art to really engage with that art, whether it's literature, a statue, a painting, anything, spoken word, it all requires the focus.
Yoga is an art within itself. With all the poses and the moves, it makes a sort of dance. See now as I demonstrate a sun salutation, and watch how the moves flow together gracefully and make a piece of art.
Hey, for those of you who play sports, meditation is just an exercise, but for your mind. Let me tell you why. Meditation has a lot of impacts on your brain scientifically. Let me just tell you some of them. Meditation helps to prevent you from getting Alzheimer's when you get older because when you meditate, your gray matter in your brain doesn't deteriorate as fast. Number 2, ever find your mind often wander into places of the unknown and you start to scare yourself and get anxious and stressed? Well, meditation helps to take that center of the brain where mind wandering happens and decrease its activity so you won't have any more mind wandering. Therefore, you won't get anxiety. Number 3, meditation increases the strength of your brain. Therefore, you have better memory, you're able to learn better, and like I said before, it reduces stress, anxiety, and even fear. Number 4, a study recently showed that only a couple of weeks of regular meditation helped people with ADD to concentrate better on things in school such as tests, quizzes, and even writing essays. Number 5, another study showed that people who were struggling with addiction were able to quit 17 weeks faster while meditating than those who weren't meditating. And finally, number 6, a high-risk school district in San Francisco began to implement meditating into their everyday schedule. Let me tell you the results. They began to get less suspensions, the students' GPAs began to rise, and their attention focused a lot more on things like tests and quizzes.
Aren't you glad you know so much about yoga and meditation now?
Golly, that was sure a lot more fun than I thought it would be.